your battle doesn't have to be against your fellow man. It could be against what Jesus said, like, my enemy isn't flesh and blood. I've come to bring a sword. But, like, what the sword is against the kingdoms of darkness. That's what St. Paul prays against. And so I think about these things when I think about, like, my hope for my readers is to say, like, you have to imagine a life that isn't yours yet, but you could be. And you could start imagining what that looks like even now. You could start putting it into practice. You could become a man or a woman of prayer, a man or woman of love. Your kids might think you hate them, but in the course of 2 years, 3 years, you might reform your child's heart through unconditional love. And you don't know how healing that could be, not just for them, but for the world, for their friends, for their community, for every person that they're going to affect for the rest of their life.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we could make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. Today, I'm sitting down with Josh Nadeau, author of the new book, Heaven Meets Earth, a 40-day devotional walking through the Nicene Creed through the lens of beauty. The Nicene Creed is 1,700 years old. Most of us have either memorized it or ignored it. But Josh makes the case that it was never meant just to be a statement of intellectual belief. It's an invitation to ascend the mountain where heaven and earth overlap, to encounter the goodness, truth, and beauty of God, and let those things actually form us. So what happens is the creed forms the church. We talk about why beauty might be the most underused entry point into deep faith, how the ancient spiritual practices shape our loves rather than just our thoughts, and why the Western church has largely lost its capacity for wonder, and what it might look like to recover it. This is a wonderful conversation that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. So join us. Here is my conversation with Josh Nadeau. Josh, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
So excited to be here with you. Thank you so much.
We're talking about your new book, Heaven Meets Earth. You're talking about 40 days, getting into the Nicene Creed. What you seem to be doing with us is helping us embody it, to live it, to let it consume us, and us be consumed with this thing. Why that approach? Why is it something that we want to embody and not just think about?
I think for me, one of the main reasons is I've done tons of devotionals. I grew up in the church, and a lot of them were exactly like what you said. They're just like, hey, if you think these intellectual thoughts, they'll save you. And I thought all the thoughts, I did all the stuff, and nothing really transformed my life. It's funny, like, so I grew up, we were catechized growing up. I was a Reformed Baptist kid growing up. And we did Louis Burkhoff's systematic theology for family devotions and Grudem and Sproul. And so I had all the thoughts in my head, and the verse that's coming to mind is like, even the demons know. But like believing is very different and living is very different. And so what I wanted to do with Heaven Meets Earth was kind of introduce the truth of the creed through the lens of beauty. So like I believe in the transcendentals, goodness, truth, and beauty. God is the source of all goodness, the source of all truth, the source of all beauty. And so my vision was, if I want people to believe with their whole person, body, soul, heart, soul, mind, and strength, to be scriptural, then I think one of the easiest ways to get at their minds is through their hearts. And beauty kind of captures our heart. So what I really wanted to do was take the truth of the creed. I mean, well, there's so many important things to talk about the creed and what it is and why the creed in general. But instead of aiming it at someone's head, just to aim it directly at their heart. How do you experience the creed? How do you live out the creed? How do you let the creed form your loves and shape your loves and therefore shape your life and then therefore shape how you view the world?
I mean, early in the book, right at the very beginning of your book, you get into a place of you get to walk up a mountain and get to a place where heaven and earth overlap.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful image and a picture for us to like move up the mountain. And this is then a metaphor for you to like take us through the journey. But take us into the mountain, take us into this place where heaven overlaps earth. And what is it? Like, it's not just mountaintop experiences. So what is this heaven and earth overlapping moment for it.
Totally. So in scripture, the reason I used a mountain, first off, it was an amazing hike. So I don't want to spoil anything, but it was a once in a lifetime kind of experience. But in scriptures, the heavens are the places where people would meet God. So Eden was said to be at the top of hills. So God met people at the top of a mountain. God meets Moses at the top of a mountain. Jesus crucified at the top of a mountain. And the new heavens and the new earth, the rivers are running down from the throne of God. So it's just always where heaven and earth are overlapping. And so there's like this continuing biblical theological theme throughout scripture of when Christ comes, heaven and earth overlap more and more. The Holy Spirit dwells within us. So heaven and earth are overlapping within us. And the fullness of heaven and earth overlapping is in recreation, new heavens and new earth. And so what I wanted to do was say, listen, the truth is supposed to be that. God's truth, God's revelation is supposed to be this place where heaven meets earth over and over for full consummation. So the idea of going up the mountain with the creed is to say, listen, every thought you could ever think, every dogma, every platitude, every creed of the Christian church is an invitation to ascend the mountain and meet God through it. Now, you can reduce that to just intellectual experience, or you could start assessing what it would be like to live these things out in your everyday life. And that's where things become really tricky because culturally, we don't have an appetite for that. And culturally, we don't really know what the next steps are. Like we live in a very modern, postmodern world where data and science and facts are the end of all things. And so we think to ourselves, this is the life I used to live, which was, so I have my master's in theology. And I don't mind being very honest. When I was in seminary and graduating, I was also an alcoholic and very suicidal. So at the peak of my knowledge, I was at the worst place in my life. And the reason is just brute facts alone don't save me. And so again, offering this opportunity to give people like, listen, if you think facts are going to save you, they won't. You need more. So what I wanted this book to be is this like converging introduction to how do I begin to translate the things I believe into my life? How do I begin to translate these ancient creeds and foundations of the church into a modern world? Like this was written 1700 years ago, but like this is key stuff. This is the roots of our faith. And so there's all these introduction things I wanted to bring together to say, listen, this might be the first step of many for a person to start experiencing an embodied spirituality rooted in Orthodox Christianity.
I think a lot of times us in the West, we come from a materialistic, rationalistic faith that we don't realize what has actually deformed us
Mhm.
in the world of like seeing it through a whatever we can see, touch, and feel is reality and it's true. Everything else is nothing. And as I moved from that type of faith that I was raised in into like moving into the Middle East, encountering Muslims that have had lots of dreams of Jesus and like the spiritual, the heavens, the spiritual life really intersected with their natural life, their physical life. And it was like an easy flow. And I come back into the West and I share these stories. And the question is, how come it never happens in the West? And I mean, my answer is I don't think we're paying attention to it. We just
Mhm.
forgot it's there. So we don't pay attention. I think God's encountering us in dreams all the time. I think that God's encountering us in beauty and wonder and creation all the time. Like all over the place. We've stopped paying attention. How can we move towards attention seeking
Mhm.
to see the wonder of God in everyday life?
Man, I love that question. And I agree with you. I think that we've learned a way of being, like a language and a perspective that has cut us off from the supernatural reality that is the world, right? Like, so if the world is made by Christ, the divine Logos, then all of creation, like Psalm says, that the creation sings forth his praise. Everything echoes and has the truer reality just underneath it. So in the Christian East, like in Eastern Orthodoxy, they have icons. I have one right there on my desk. And they believe that those things icons depict the hidden layer of reality, spiritual realities through the physical. And I love that concept. And Chesterton talks about like, we don't starve for lack of wonders, we starve for lack of wonder. We have plenty of beautiful things to look at. We just aren't mesmerized by things anymore. We're so rational, so distracted, we're so busy. I think one of the biggest curses in our day and age is the smartphone. I'm a dad of 2 kids and another one's on the way, and I'll go to the park all the time, and kids are bursting with life and wonder. And countless times, this is no judgment, but countless times I know parents need a break. So sometimes I'll be at the park and I just see them on their phones and their kids playing. And I think to myself, I'm already in a different world than my 3-year-old. He looks under a rock and he's experiencing kingdoms unseen. And I'm like, dude, it's just potato bugs. But if you're in a virtual world, then you are light years away from your child. And I think so. Yesterday we were at church. We were at a divine liturgy yesterday, actually. And it was a really long service. So my son is waving at everyone and he's making the sign of the cross. And then he's reading his little books and he's playing with his trains. And the gospel reading was about the prodigal son. And I had this thought when the older son says, like, listen, I've stayed with you forever. And the father says, all I have is yours. And I'm looking at my son who's in service, reading books and playing with trains. And I can kind of picture God the Father saying, all I have is yours. And my son being like, yeah, I know. Thanks for the trains and books. I'm going to enjoy your presence and enjoy your gifts. But we don't know how to be thankful or grateful or like have eyes to see the gifts that surround us. And we are formed, like to get all spiritual formation, we are formed by a world of instant gratification and digital screens where, I mean, it takes a little bit of time to learn how to enjoy a sunrise again. Or God forbid, we just use the radio because I don't think my kid, he's 3, my oldest, should think that, hey, I can say, Papa, let me listen to Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd and you just get it. Be like, no, if it comes on the radio, then we lose our minds because we get our song. So the joy of patience and slow. So when it comes to the book and the wonder and experiencing the joy of everyday life, I think some of it is an appetite. And it's why I set the book up to be, each day is short enough. So like, it's not, I understand what I'm asking of people. I understand what, like, books demand a high price nowadays, right? I want 15 hours of your time. So this book is like, I want 40 days of your time. Even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, I want 40 days in a row is what I'm asking from you. So there's art on 20 of the days, and I did my best for them to be engaging and draw you in. And the text, I did the same thing. But the hope is that this starts to whet the appetite, where it's you say to yourself, you know what, maybe there are things all around me in life that if I looked at them just a little bit longer, I would start to see the open invitation of God in them. My child, my food, my stalled car. What lessons are my stalled car teaching me about patience and transcending normal experience? Like, one of the questions I ask my wife, I say to my wife all the time is like, man, how much does my goodness, my virtue depend on an easy life? My car stalls and I'm like, what the heck? I'd be like, oh my gosh. Like,
Yeah,
Josh.
well, that's, I picked the car up from the shop 3 Thursdays in a row in 3 weeks in a row. So last Thursday was the last one. I went to the woman checking me out, and I'm, giving her my money. I was like, my wife tells me I can't see you anymore. We're breaking up.
It's not you, it's me.
That's right. We're not doing this anymore. I'm
Yeah.
done. I don't know why God said let's do this 3 times to get something in you, but
Totally. I think about that stuff all the time. I was driving the other day and I got cut off 3 times yesterday. And the third time, my son's in the back and he's singing. And I was this close to just cussing. And I was like, you know what? Slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to become angry. That's a tough verse. I got to get that tattooed on me, I think.
I think, so we're talking about, slowing down and paying attention is really important. And this is what you're trying to help us do. And so I want to get into some of these practices that help us, but why do practices like spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices help form us? Not all of us, but why do they help form us to get us to this place that intellectualism just can't get us to? Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening and thank you for supporting the show. If you'd like to support the show and get early ad-free episodes, you go to Substack at shiftingculture.substack.com. And with your subscription, you could have a private podcast feed in your podcast app where you get to download early episodes before anybody gets to listen to them. You could also support the show by going to the support the show link at the bottom of the show notes in the app that you're using right now. That goes to a page that supports the work my wife and I do around the world. That donation is also tax deductible. So if you want a tax deductible donation, you could go there. Or if you want to support the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps new listeners find the show as well. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. And thank you so much for supporting this work so that we could see the body of Christ look more like Jesus.
Man, again, I love this question. Like right now, my desk is super messy because I'm working on the next book and it's about the practices explicitly. And the goal, one of the things, the issues that I find with the formation books that I've read and the practice books that I've read is they're kind of like Atomic Habits or whatever with a little bit of Jesus sprinkled on top. And that doesn't do anything. So in the ancient church, the idea of the practices is you want to learn to live inside them. You don't acquire them. You don't go to the store and buy them. You don't intellectually assent to them. It's a way of life you learn to live inside. And the reason you learn to live inside that life is because that's how you participate in the divine life. So if you ever want transformation, if you ever want to be filled with the Holy Spirit and have love, joy, peace, patience mark you, the surefire way to do it is to devote yourself to the practices, to prayer, to fasting, to almsgiving, receiving the Lord's Supper. Like all of these things begin to shape us. And you start to think like the cleanest way of saying it is, so I'm reading this book by Alexander Schmemann called For the Life of the World. And he says in the beginning that God made us hungry. And in Eden, we could satisfy that hunger, but that Eden was sacramental, as in it is a visible reality explaining invisible things. So if we're hungry in Eden, that means there's something that we should be seeing through creation that leads us to the ultimate end. And so you say, like, if Adam and Eve had to eat in Eden, that means they were designed to feast on something forever. And what infinite thing could satisfy an infinite longing? It's only Christ. It's only God. So you think to yourself that, like, what the practices do is they're sacramental by nature. They make visible invisible realities. So you start to fast and you deny the body certain pleasures and needs. And I forget who it was that says it, but then they say, like, while your body fasts, your soul feasts. And while your body feasts, your soul is fasting. And so there's this tension that goes on. If you live a generous life when you're giving to others, you're saying, I won't be mastered by anything. So I'm making this invisible reality of submission with all of my powers to God and using it the way that he would in the kingdom. So what the practices do is they begin to teach our body. So one of the tensions in my life that is in all of my writing and all of my art, I'm so sorry, this gets me so jazzed up. These are amazing questions. Is I think that there are embodied things that teach our soul, and then there are also embodied things that we can learn to spiritualize. So what we do with our body can teach our soul. So oftentimes, like, I'm not a good prayer, but what I do is I do the Lord's Prayer every morning. I do the Lord's Prayer. I set up things and I teach my body, no, you're going to learn to like this. So when Paul says, I beat my body and make it my slave, like there's a lot of things I don't know if you heard this growing up. So I was Reformed Baptist growing up. I'm not that anymore. And one of the things I always heard is my emotions were bad. My longings were not good. And I remember coming to this realization to be like, well, they might be bad, but they might be good. My body's fallen, but so's my mind. So what if the longings of my body, if they're oriented towards bad things, what if that's just a signpost to say, well, Josh, you could fix that and point it towards the good? So like take our modern era of sex and porn and everything and be like, if that's what you desire, learn to say, hey, your body craves a perverted form of a good gift. So beat your body, make it your slave, teach it to love fidelity and chastity and intimacy and self-control, and you will experience the divine life. Anyways, end of my rant. I could go on forever. So that's why I think the body is so important to our spiritual walk.
You've articulated something with what is true, good, and beautiful into like beauty leads us into these things. And so beauty is the thing that leads the way into the good and the true virtues. I wonder if something like we have seen some perversions of truth in the Christian church in the United States recently. It's not great around here, and so I, I, wo- I wonder
Yeah.
if it is like the ultimate focus on just what is true and forgetting what is good and beautiful that has the church lose its way
Mm.
into something that doesn't resemble the beauty of Christ anymore.
Mhm. You're picking up on something so key. So like just in the Trinity, the idea is like perichoresis. So the Father and the Son are united. They're separate, distinct, without separation. They're united without fusion. That's all the theological language. For the transcendentals, it's the same. So when you ask yourself, what is true? If it is not defined by goodness and beauty, then it can't be true. If you ask yourself, what's good? What is virtue? If it's not true and beautiful, then it can't be a good way of life. And when you ask yourself, what's beautiful? If it's not good and true. So I think in our culture, like we've watched beauty disappear. Culturally, it's no longer a value. We've substituted it for whatever reason for bottom lines and profit margins. So, like, good materials and extra time on ornate society, a beautiful society, good food, all these things. We've cut corners. We've done tons of things. And that's just the idea of like architecture and food. Like you can look at how we dress, how we speak, the things we enjoy, the stories we consume, even how we think and how we articulate. Beauty is just it, I believe the attack on the culture wars. How I don't know how people phrase it anymore. It used to be years ago the attack on the West, and now that's a bigger political thing. So I'm not saying anything political because my mind is too lost in theological things. But I do think that the attack on modern society and the erosion of brotherly love, say, comes because we have gotten rid of beauty as a primary value in society. We have reduced it to luxury. We say, oh, if you have a nice painting in your house, that's a luxury piece. We don't think about all of these things that beauty does to us. So, like, one of the thought processes people can do, I love this thought experiment, is just you just imagine your life with no beauty. So you picture every house is a box, every body is a pale square. There's no more Netflix, there's no more stories, there's no more sitcoms, there's no more books, there's no more anything. You have no shows to watch, no music to listen to, no beauty. And then you start to think, what kind of person would I be to myself, to my fellow man? And when you start imagining that world, what would my relationship with God be like? So I don't get to go to the ocean anymore. I don't get to go to the mountains. We're talking about the Pacific Northwest before this. I don't get to see the trees. I don't get to see anything. Then you start thinking like, well, how similar am I to that right now? And so the reason I think beauty is an apologetic for the modern age is I think it is inviting people into a great like Christian beauty. God is the source of all beauty. Is inviting people into a greater reality than they currently experience through something that they're starving for. Like we don't starve for lack of education. I in my pocket with my phone, I can Google anything. We have tons of justice, goodness, virtue movements on left and right and center of everything. Everyone's pursuing some sort of goodness. But beauty is far gone. Like I was saying to my friends the other day, we were just hanging out, and I was like, even when you look at movies nowadays, it's just like there's no new stories, there's no depth. It's just the same. It's whatever's going to make money at the box office. And so I think one of the things that is probably happening, I'm Canadian, so I won't comment too much on Americana right now. But I think the easiest thing for me to see, and I see it in my country too, you see it all over the place on both sides. You see this idea of a very tight grasp on, say, virtues or truth. And those tend to be the value systems of, say, left and right, good acts and truth or whatever, and learning how those to be in tension. And the way they remain in tension is you have to have something beautiful that unifies them. My wife and I, we spent some time in Europe, and you go into an old church, and it doesn't everyone travels the world to go see these old churches. And as soon it doesn't matter if you're the biggest atheist on the planet, you walk inside that church and you take your hat off and you're silent and you're calm. And you start to look at a whole world that invites you into a contemplative silence where you're paying attention to the world around you, maybe for the first time. And I think that's what Christian beauty ought to be doing at the societal level. I mean, I don't have all the answers to what that looks like politically. I wish I did. I'd be a millionaire if I did. I mean, or I'd be the Messiah. But I think at the base level, one of the invitations that goes out to every person is, what if you made your life beautiful in Christ and invited the people around you into that beauty? And I think that's kind of how you transform the world. That's like what I think that's what the Great Commission is all about. It's transforming the world one dinner at a time kind of thing.
Our church is called Nava. It means
Mhm.
bring home and make beautiful. It's a Hebrew word, and that's like so. It's our name. It's who we are. It's our purpose. It's what
Mm.
God has said. Like, it's to like make beauty in the world. But it's like in everyday acts, we're making beauty. Like it's not just the beautiful art that you make. It's not just in creative storytelling, but it is in everyday acts. So I want to know, like, every day in a person, like, what does it mean to then, as you said, have something holding the tension, which is beautiful. And that means like making home for these things in the beauty of the world.
Mhm.
What does that look like every day?
I wrote a book about this, actually. It's my first book, Room for Good Things to Run Wild. And how ordinary people become everyday saints is the subtitle. And the idea is like your ordinary life is the vehicle by which you experience God's goodness, truth, and his beauty. And so like we have a 1-year-old son and a 3-year-old son, another one on the way. And so lots of nights are sleepless. And what's really beautiful about a morning together is, even if we're all tired and we have really nice coffee, so we make a nice coffee. We all spend the morning together, they're playing, and you just carve out time and space where like what you want to do is be grumpy and angry, and you say, "You know what? The virtue of patience and gentleness with my children and with myself, and my head is a cloud and it's throbbing because I'm exhausted and I have a whole day of work and I could bicker and complain." But you start to think about, okay, like, what about an everyday like, what about my everyday life is inviting me into, say, goodness, truth, or beauty? So that moment is inviting you into the virtue of patience and kindness and gentleness. And then you think about, well, like, how can I help myself get there? So for me, beauty is a really easy way to help us get there. So we have a lot of Christian imagery up in our house. We have a lot of paintings up in our house that really resonate with us. And so I'll be making the coffee, and right above the coffee stand, I have like a couple albums. I have some Johnny Cash albums. And I think a lot of times about the man comes around, like Johnny Cash song. And I think to myself, I'm like, Josh, like, this, your life is so fleeting. The man, Christ, is going to come around, and how will he find you? If he returned in this moment, would he find you complaining? So Johnny Cash is my soft hookup into saying, like, you know what? That beautiful song invites me to be virtuous to my kids. And so I think what you do, I think you do need beautiful things. I think in a culture that is starved from beautiful things, I think beautiful things shape how you think, and they shape how you take care of yourself and the world around you. But those beautiful things aren't ends in and of themselves. That's what Lewis talks about. Lewis says this thing where he's like, we have an inconsolable longing within us. And if we transform the beautiful things or the good things or the true things in our life to the ends in ourselves, they ruin us. What we have to do is realize that the goodness of God is what's coming through these things. And what we're longing for is life everlasting. And so the as beautiful as I try to make my life and my room and my house with my wife and kids, I have to realize that like these are just invitations into a greater beauty.
As you walk us through the Nicene Creed and you help us move up this mountain
Mhm.
to realize that heaven and earth are already overlapping, and we could actually then open our eyes to what is there in front of us. One of the things you do is visio divina, which
Mhm.
is it is contemplating art and then saying, God, what are you going to speak to me about this and through this, and how can I then practically put this into my life?
Mhm.
So I think the other one is lectio divina, so it's divine reading, and so you take scripture. I think a lot of people are like, "Hey, I could do this. I could like read something," and like there's a lot of people that are like, "We're Bible people. We could read and we could do this," but not. Some people are like, "This is strange, like art." I mean, I love it, but
Mhm.
to speak to people like, what is the good and the true and the beautiful that comes out of
Mhm.
actually contemplating and looking at art that can actually then help us embody some of this creed?
Mhm. Yeah, so structurally, you're bang on. So we did the creed in 20 phrases, and each phrase gets 2 days. One is a lectio style day, and one is a visio style day. The visio style days are a lot of fun because the lectio, what I wanted to do was introduce like Nicene theology as kind of like an intro to what you have to believe to be a Christian, and to do it from this perspective of beauty and contemplation and prayerfulness. So I wanted to make the truths very palpable and have you experience them. The cool thing about art is you can play around with many layers of thought and biblical theological themes and stack them all at once. So images can do something that words never do. And so some of them, I don't want to give spoilers to the art, but some of them, like say the baptism of Christ, I have the Red Sea and the crucifixion. And so you have all of these things that are there's I don't mind spoiling a little bit. So as the waters part of the Red Sea that's parting is blood and water. And so there's this like what I'm saying is what Christ does on the cross is part the sea for us. And when blood and water flow from Christ's side, blood and water part. So you can do this meta level thing and have your whole body and soul be ushered into, and you don't have to understand it all at once. That's the cool thing about art. Art speaks to your body and your soul before it speaks to your mind. So what I want, like what I love doing, the kind of art that I love doing that I grew up on is a lot of folk and mythic art, very traditional style art, which feels so familiar to all of us, right? We all grew up reading folk stories and we see them and we're like, this is like something I've seen before. But what's going on here? And I like having complex images so your eyes can move around and you try to take in the image. And the way I set it up is like I say, like, just look at the image, take a minute or two, and try to think about like what's going on with the hierarchy, what's above and what's below, what's at the center, what's at the balance, and what's out of balance. And then the writing I do for the day kind of explains the symbols, the symbolism, the meta narrative. And then the questions take that feeling. What I wanted to do, it's really hard to come up with questions. I'm not a very devotional style guy. So I was sitting there I've at my desk and I was like, okay, Lord, what's a question that takes the feeling a person is going to have looking at the baptism of Christ or the resurrection or the ascension or the final judgment, and say, take that question and then aim it to like your Tuesday morning. Like, how do I do that for someone? How do I help someone take a beautiful thing they've seen and aim it at their normal everyday life? And a lot of the I came up with some good questions, so like they are helpful, I think. But a lot of the impulse behind it was essentially saying, you need to start seeing your life this way. Look at the hierarchy in your life. Like, love God, love your fellow man. And when you go into the world, be like, well, that's my fellow man. Like, that's the same as Josh's picture when people are watching the ascension, when people are bearing witness to these things, and be like, is that me actually in the picture? Or is this my perspective? Is this something that I should be seeing in reality? And so Visio Divina, it's not a common practice, especially in the West. It's not a common practice in the modern world, actually, because like mostly, have you heard of this, Joshua? There's the two screen thing where Netflix, if they want to release something, it has to have two screen power. It has to engage you enough that you look away from your first screen, the
Yeah, Matt
phone.
Damon was just talking about this a lot when he was talking about the rip and what Netflix said. You know, it's like you have to state the purpose of the movie like 4 times in the movie. Like, here's your main theme, like what is actually happening. So it's a two screen. It's horrible. I was like, why? No.
Yeah, no, those people don't deserve to know what the movie's about.
Exactly.
I was just chatting with someone like I have my kids and they're just learning the consequences of boundaries, and if they cross the threshold, to be like, sorry, you can say sorry as many times as you want. The consequences for doing or not doing that thing are you get or don't get this. And I was like, you know what? We need a little bit more of that societally. We need like some dad to come in and just slap the wrist of a bunch of people, be like, pay attention to the movie. Can you not disengage for so much? And so, like, I really did want the art to offer that invitation to experience something and then have the devotional write up for the day help you translate the joy of that feeling and explain it. And then the meditation practice to start saying, like, what would this be like? Not just what was this for them or how does that make me feel, but like, how does that play out on my Tuesday?
This imagery of going up the mountain and doing this for 40 days, what it does for me is it makes me read the creed as story and not just as theology. It's really, I was like, this is really cool. Like, this is like, I can now live the story. I can't live like facts about anything. But I can live a story. It goes into, our autobiographical memory, and it's like there's brain science, yada yada. But what happens is that, oh, okay, now this is actually a story that I'm getting up to. It
Mhm.
seems to me this is like, if I am just naming the facts about things and the theology, I get stuck at the bottom of the mountain and I don't go anywhere because there's no telos, there's no ending, there's no like journey to get anywhere. How did you did you even think about story and telos and journey and purpose when you were working these things out?
Yeah, very much so. One of the big thought I remember reading this years ago. It might have been in seminary, but like in the Christian world, we think that the church formed the creed. We read the scriptures or people watch the life of Christ and say, you know what? Let's compile this as a creedal document to define what we are. And there is a narrative behind it coming out of the Arian controversy. But what the church believes is that the creed forms the church. It is truths that we discovered and say put together, but that creed then turns around and it informs the church and structures the church. This is what you read. And I mean, in the church traditional growing up, this is what you read Sunday after Sunday during the liturgy. This is what you had to confess at your baptism. This is what you experienced in the sacraments. And so what it did is the creed became so internalized that it formed how a person did their living. And what I really wanted to do is say, like, listen, you could let the creed form you again. You could participate in the story of the creed, as in this is the structure and the foundation of how the church is formed and how we can be formed. And then invite people in that same journey to say, like, okay, I'll go through it a day at a time. And then I'll try to put a little bit of it into practice. And by the end of it, there's a familiarity you start to get. Because one of the encouragements I write early on is just read it every day. Read the creed every day. It'll take you an extra minute to go through the creed. And so there's this familiarity where you start, like, you kind of have it memorized by the end of the 40 days. And you've dwelt in the pages so long. And I quote Lewis at the beginning of like getting the clean sea breeze of the ages in you. And I think it's like one of those things. I'm sure you've had this experience where like you get an epiphany and you're like, "Oh man, of course." But this is kind of like that same epiphany but for your body, where like you get out of a plane and you breathe fresh air instead of recycled air for however many hours. The creed can kind of do that to you where you start thinking to your like breathing fresh air again. And so the narrative component to it was like, listen, if the creed is what formed the church and it formed it over time and it became like this thing that the church metabolized and became a part of its body, then I want to invite people into the same process. Process is probably the best way of articulating what I wanted it to how I wanted the creed to be experienced. Where at first it's foreign to you, and then you kinda get it, and then it's familiar, and then by the end, the true hope is to say, "Oh, I might have to walk up this mountain countless times, because I don't think I could ever be familiar with the depth of the creed."
So as we're confronted with 40 days of this, what does it look like to go into the wilderness of this unfamiliar terrain and come back with a gift?
Yeah. The hope, this is the big question. This is the big thing that you really ask your readers with any book, but a 40-day book in particular, because you're signaling you're on one side and you hope to emerge out the other side transformed. And so when we were coming up with the subtitle, the publishing house was like, let's do a 40-day journey of transformation. I was like, I don't want to oversell the transformation. This is like promising something that I don't know if I can deliver. And you know what? It hit me after we got off the call and I acquiesced. I said, you know what? I'm not responsible for the transformation. I'm responsible for a bit of the map. And so what I really hope people do, and this is a thing again that I think modern society has, we've kind of given up on, is we don't give people the autonomy and the responsibility they need to feel for their own life. So they are responsible. Whoever buys this, if you listen to this lovely podcast and you pick up the book, I'm going to do my best to help you, but you're responsible for putting whatever you want on the line to experience healing and transformation. So I went through the book after it was done, and I had no clue what I was going to experience. I wrote it, but I was like, you know what, Josh, you have things in your life. You have an impatience and an anger, or you have whatever these things be that bubble up, and learning to reimagine those things and then go like processing them day by day, and then imagining how God, like our Father, being the maker of heaven and earth, you start to just like, even that in and of itself, how the creed opens, we believe so together, and be like, oh man, how together are you really, Josh, if you're angry at someone? God the Father Almighty, and be like, oh, you're so weak. Like, what is your anger doing? What is your impatience doing? Maker of heaven and earth. And like, the only thing I make is a mess. Like, you made heaven and earth, man, like things visible and invisible. And so you start to imagine your life through the lens of the creed, and it orients you. But what happens, this is the best thing about it going day by day, is your days will interrupt you. And then the next day you bring the interruption. And so if you're open-handed, the journey of transformation is exactly what you need when you need it, if you're open. And so I couldn't orchestrate that for anyone. What I could do is give you the creed. If there's anything I could give you that I'd have nothing to worry about, it'd be like, listen, this is the thing that Christians have believed for since the beginning. So please, if you go through this and you start to imagine the third time you take your car in, and you're on the third time, and pretend that's the communion of saints. And you start to think to yourself about like, okay, like, I'm not the only person with car trouble. Are there other people with car trouble? You just start to think about a community, and you start to think about how like the creed just starts to swirl around in your mind. And so I guess the gift that I want to offer people is responsibility. Like when Jesus says, I've come to heal the sick, those who think they're fine, they have no need of me. And he's giving a hard wink at the Pharisees, who are hypocrites. And he's looking at the sinners and tax collectors, heavy air quotes I'm putting up. Yeah. And he's like saying, like, we're all sick. If you bring your sickness to me, I will heal you. And so I think the transformation is an open-handed gift, where like I said, it's why I open with the mountain. This is a map. This is the way. I can't walk it for you. But if you do walk it in faith, I do firmly trust, not because of my loaves and fish, but because Christ multiplies, there will be transformation.
You know, you're wearing a hat that says saint.
Yeah.
Your your subtitle of your last book had everyday saints in it. This sainthood idea is probably pretty key to who you are.
Yeah.
What now have you, as you've been journeying with that word and what it is, what do you think it is? Like, what does it mean to you? What's
Mm.
sainthood? What does being a saint mean?
This is obviously my favorite question. I grew up in the church, and you think like of arriving in the church as you be a pastor, you be a worship leader, you be a missionary, you be these things. So those are good things. But I I didn't wanna be those things growing up, and I was like, "Okay, am I like a second-class citizen in the church and in the community of God? Where do I fit? How do I fit?" And there's just, like, normal questions, but as I grew up and went through my experiences, I slowly learned that the purpose of life is to become a saint. And so, so we have heroes in the Christian faith, and they're saints. They're men and women who have walked the path. But sainthood, we we can dress it up because there's confirmed saints in the Catholic Church and the Eastern Church and High Church Protestantism. But outside of all that, a person who is a saint is just a person who is participating in the life of God. So the cleanest way of saying it is just be like, they're just loyal to God first. They love God most and love neighbor second. They fulfill the whole law by loving God and loving neighbor. And so my conception is every moment of my life is an invitation into sainthood. So that when I wake up in the morning and I don't sleep well and I'm feeling grumpy, I say to myself, Josh, this is your invitation into sainthood. How would a saint act in this situation? Would they cuss out their kids and their wife? Would they slam the coffee down and blah, blah, blah? No, they would show love and patience and mercy and kindness. And so sainthood to me is this narrative way of reframing a beautiful life and a virtuous life and a true life by an invitation. Now, there is this reality, like if you are in Christ, you're already a saint, and then we would say not yet a saint. But the tension that I wanted to bring up was honoring those who have gone before us, who the church is, oh, even if you are in like a low church, non-denominational place, everyone recognizes heroes of the faith who have gone far beyond us in their Christ likeness. But the whole purpose of our life is Christ likeness. And so when I say saint, saint is just shorthand for Christ likeness, becoming like Saint Athanasius said, and C.S. Lewis echoes, God became man that we might become God. And that idea is just taking on his communicable attributes to get all theological so no one thinks like I'm a Mormon, I guess. But the idea of sainthood is just this invitation into loving obedience and faith acting itself out in love. And I love the narrative component to that. We're like, even right now, getting to connect with you and have this conversation, this is an opportunity for both of us. Like, I feel sharpened, I feel encouraged. I start to recognize, like, hey, there are like-minded people around the world. I get excited when I hang up and I go tell my wife how this went. I get to be like, man, there are saints everywhere. There are everyday saints everywhere. There are moms who are taking care of their kids by themselves and they're changed the 18th diaper, and they're being saints because they're being lovingly obedient in the ordinary and inviting the infinite into the ordinary. And that kid, I'm so sorry I'm ranting, that kid through that mom is experiencing infinite love. And that's the part that's crazy. The transcendent comes through our ability to obey. And when we deny it, you think, well, what's my kid experiencing? If he's not experiencing the divine life through me, what's he experiencing? And it's the absence of the divine life. And so then that scares me a ton because I don't want my kids' ideas of the world from me to become demonic is probably the harshest way of saying it. But what I mean is absent of God's goodness.
If my child is not going to experience the divine love, which I remember when he was like 3 or 4, and someone asked me, they're like, "How are you doing discipling your kid?" And so I just like shouted across the room. I was like, "Luke, do you feel loved? Are you loved?" And he said, "Yes, I am loved." And I was like, and then I turned to the guy. I was like, "I'm doing great.
Yeah, dude, I
I'm doing
almost
really
cried.
well." Like that feels like that's it, like especially at a young age, like whatever, they're going to get some of these facts, but they need to experience that love so
Mhm.
that could orient them in their life. And what I was thinking when you were sharing is that divine love, if they're not experiencing that, then the imagination for what is good, true, and beautiful that can be in this world is gone. They don't
Yes.
have it. They need that divine love so that their true imagination can actually then start to open up the world in front of them. And then goodness and beauty and truth can actually then be cultivated in this world.
That'll preach.
It's the imagination that is something that we have lost in the church, our discipleship, and our orientation to Christ,
Mhm.
because we've lost some of this beauty, and the goodness. I mean, so we need that imagination, and you're doing some great work, and the work to bring some of that back to us that we so desperately need. So well done. And so thank you for that. if you had one hope for your readers, what hope do you have for them?
I think you summed it up. Just like a big thing for me is cultivating a holy imagination. Wendell Berry says you have to imagine a life that isn't yours. And the only it's maybe one of the greatest sins to amend Wendell Berry, but I say you have to imagine life that isn't yours yet. You can imagine you can imagine a loving life. Like you could be a saint. I get emotional thinking about it. Like you could be a saint. You could be a driving force of light in this world. Your battle doesn't have to be against your fellow man. It could be against what Jesus said, like my enemy isn't flesh and blood. I've come to bring a sword. But like what the sword is against the kingdoms of darkness. That's what St. Paul prays against. And so I think about these things when I think about like my hope for my readers is to say, like, you have to imagine a life that isn't yours yet. But you could be, and you could start imagining what that looks like even now. You could start putting it into practice. You could become a man or a woman of prayer, a man or woman of love. Your kids might think you hate them, but in the course of 2 years, 3 years, you might reform your child's heart through unconditional love. And you don't know how healing that could be, not just for them, but for the world, for their friends, for their community, for every person that they're going to affect for the rest of their life. And so for me, I think exactly what you said, like that holy imagination of love, allowing you to interpret the world properly. And then what that means is you have to imagine a life that you do not attain to yet, but you might attain to it. And even if you fail, like what a way to fail. I failed trying to participate in the divine life, to make known the love of God. It'd be like, yeah, me too, dude. Like I'm going to fail. Second I hang up, I'll stub my toe and cuss and be like, and then I'll cuss again that I cussed. And it'll be this repeating circle of failure. But what I want to do is be like, you know what, Lord, I imagine a day where I don't react in anger. And so, yeah, the hope for my readers is the same hope I have for me. It's the same hope I have for everyone, that you might just look at your everyday life and see, like, you know what, I could imagine this local, little, ordinary life is a gift. And I could say thank you for the gift for once. I wouldn't have to, like, listen, the world is broken and falling apart. I know what taxes are like. I know what the cost of living is like, but I got a roof over my head. I have kids who smile and giggle and play together. I have a wife who at least tolerates me. She loves me. I'm very blessed. And you know what? And even when things are dark, we're invited into that to say, like, listen, how can we imagine a life that isn't ours yet? How can I pray for those who persecute me? So anyways, I could go on forever, but I that's the hope. The hope is like what you said, holy imaginations.
Yeah. So good. A couple quick questions,
Yeah.
Josh, here at the end. One, if you go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Don't drink. Drinking is not the cope. That's when I became an alcoholic. So, drinking age is 19 in Canada. The advice I would give is never be afraid to go on the journey you need to go on. I think I was really afraid that I was gonna mess up my life, and so I denied thinking certain things or saying certain things or articulating certain things. Um, I'm a very strong. It's the artist in me. I'm a very strong believer in practicing what you preach. And, I think Paul is too. Paul says, like, "Listen, even if it's bad," and I think what Paul's like, "We hand him over to Satan." What he means is let him live in the consequences of his life, and we pray for his reconciliation. And so that would one of the piece of advice I'd be like, "Listen, don't take your eyes off the truth, but, like, figure it out." And, I did, and it turned out really well. I had people praying for me and a wife that supported me, and I'm very thankful.
Yeah, it sounds like your wife is a saint through all
Oh,
of that.
she's the best, dude. I don't have enough good things. You know what? I think about all these things I do, and I get to do a lot of these calls, and people are like, "Oh wow, Josh, it's so cool to meet you." And I'm like, "Listen, if you met my wife, like
Yeah.
she's the glue that holds this whole thing together."
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that way about my wife too. I do. Josh, anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
I'm in a big fiction kick right now because I'm writing my next book. So I'm done on my studying. I'm rereading For the Life of the World. If you haven't read that by Alexander Schmemann, that's really good. I'm reading a lot of Kurt Vonnegut. I love Kurt Vonnegut. He does this thing that most people can't do, which is he makes the most difficult things in life darkly human.
Mm.
So I love Kurt. he has a way of articulating the human experience that invites you into the reality of it. So I reread Slaughterhouse-Five, I reread Mother Night,
Mm.
Kratz Cradle's up next. So he's just amazing, and I would highly recommend Vonnegut.
Excellent. Fantastic. That's good. Well, your book, Heaven Meets Earth, will be available February 17th, right?
Yeah.
That's just a week from tomorrow as we're recording this. So it'll be out really soon. So anywhere books are sold, you go and get that all over the world. Where would you like to point people to? How could they connect with you and what you're doing?
Yeah. So if you want to follow my art, it's at Instagram, Sword and Pencil. And then I write at a Substack called Everyday Saints. The easiest ways to connect.
Excellent. Well, Josh, thank you for walking us through this, taking us through this journey, the Nicene Creed, up the mountain where heaven and earth overlap, so that we could actually see divine love being produced here in this world, that the beauty could hold the tension of the truth and the goodness of the world, and we could enter into it through that, and we could see those things, the virtues, actually happen and play out every day, everywhere, through every life. So thank you. It was fantastic. Loved our conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to get to meet you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Shifting Culture. This show was edited and produced by me, Joshua Johnson, at Shifting Culture Productions. If you're enjoying the conversations, consider supporting the work by subscribing at shiftingculture.substack.com. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get ad-free early access episodes and other exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox. I'd love for you to not just listen, but engage. Reach out. Share what's resonating, and let's keep shaping culture together. Whether you're a listener with feedback, a creative with an idea, or a brand looking to connect with a thoughtful, engaged audience, let's talk. If you're interested in advertising on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Contact me directly for rates and availability. Until next time, let's keep shifting culture.